Hi, my name is Elliott Greenblatt, and some people call me Mr. Scammer because for the past 4.5 years, I've served as AARP's coordinator for Fraud Watch, a program that operates statewide in Vermont and tries to keep people alert to what the current frauds and scams are. I have a special guest today, and it's Detective Sergeant Michael Notte. Yes, Mike's been in law enforcement for a little better than 25 years.
That's correct.
Right? And you've served in the city of Rutland as a beat officer, and you've been a detective in Rutland.
Yes,
and then you've transferred over to the Vermont State Police and served in the state police in a number of different capacities.
Correct.
And currently you're with the New Haven Barracks. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you supervise the investigations unit, which operates along the western side of the state of Vermont.
Absolutely.
So you work from basically from Bennington County all the way up to Addison County.
That's correct.
Excellent. Mike's had a long history with law enforcement and has probably seen a few things change in the area of fraud and scams in those few years that he's been involved. And maybe you can kind of tell us how things were when you came into the field and then what you see as the evolution.
Yes, the changes have that I first witnessed when I first got into this career were, I mean, it was mailings. It was people would receive some certain things by mail. Sometimes it would be people even coming to the home, and there would be phone calls. What has changed is now with the internet, they're from remote locations, and technology has made it easier for the criminal to have access to our victims and create victims.
Now that has complicated life in terms of law enforcement.
It has, yes, it has, because now we have people actually voluntarily giving their savings away to people they don't know. So we don't have people reporting it because they're embarrassed. We have people that are receiving the money in different areas that are outside of our jurisdiction that we can't reach and prosecute, or by the time it gets to us, they're gone. So it has definitely complicated things.
Okay. Are we still seeing some of the what I call the old-fashioned scams going on? Or?
Yeah, not as much because people have found it easier to use technology. I mean, we do have the typical home improvement frauds and stuff like that still occurring, so I don't like to forget about those. And we still have exploitation, financial exploitation of some of our vulnerable adults that are occurring. Yes.
So let's take a minute and just, go back to that issue of the home improvement fraud.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think that's one that maybe some of us old-timers we have seen in several situations, but maybe some of the young folks are not familiar with that. And if they're a new homeowner,
Sure.
what they should be considering here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the home improvement fraud is someone will actually be coming right to your house. They'll be telling you, hey, I can do your driveway. I can fix your home. I can do this project for you. They'll require money up front and most likely won't finish the job or even start the job. Next thing you know, they have your money. You have no completed project, and then they're gone. They're a fly by night. There's some ways to prevent that, but they still exist, and there's different ways that you can help prevent that, I should say.
So basically, there's no law in Vermont that requires these folks to be registered or in any way licensed.
No, see, that's part of the problem. I mean, you can make complaints to the regulatory from the Vermont Secretary of State's office, the professional regulation. But the problem is, if they're not licensed or you don't check to see who they are, if they have, I would definitely, let me back up. I would say make sure they're insured. But the problem is they don't. And if you're trustworthy and you just give them your money, there's really nothing to check.
Okay, so doing some due diligence on your part as a homeowner in terms of validating that this person knows what they're doing. Is there anything else that you would say is critical in dealing with this? Because I would assume that if somebody comes up to you totally unsolicited and says, I'm here, your driveway looks like it needs some work, or
Absolutely.
boy, that siding on your house is kind of shabby, and I can fix that for you.
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, I would do, and what I would really recommend do, ask for references. check those references. See if there's somebody that you know. I mean, tell them, yep, thank you for the offer. Thank you for the estimate. I will get back to you. Give me a number. Get some information from them. Don't just give them your information, but definitely the references. And make sure they're credible references. Through most of frauds, what I always try to remind people, 2 words, check and verify. You always want to check it and you want to verify it because you want to be trustworthy, but you can't.
Do we see that Vermonters tend to be trustworthy?
Too trustworthy, because Vermonters are very good people. They really are. They want to see the good in everybody. But those, unfortunately, are most likely going to be your victims. And that's what they try to target, is the people that are nice.
So generally, the Vermonters are vulnerable?
Oh, absolutely. They're just as vulnerable as anybody else, unfortunately. I mean, it's unfortunate because we live in a rural state and people feel that we're safe here. But there is no boundaries when it comes to our biases when it comes to being scammed. I mean, the numbers that I think from the Consumer Assistance Program from the Attorney General's office showed last year roughly 5,500 people were victims of fraud or made complaints to them. That's a small population, because if you look at what the Federal Trade Commission and a study done showed that less than 10% of people actually report being a victim of fraud. So when you look at the numbers, they're saying roughly $600,000, I think, were lost in Vermont last year. It's probably most likely in the millions because people aren't reporting. So Vermonters are no exception to being scammed at all. So it is happening in this state.
So you've got a couple things kind of going against the enforcement side or the protective side, in that people who are victims don't come out of the woodwork to report it. And then the whole sense of being embarrassed
Absolutely
cuts into it, and people don't want to show to their friends that, well, I'm stupid, or
That's
I'm not, you know.
You're right. That's what they feel, but they're not. These people are convincing. They're very good at what they do. If they weren't, they wouldn't be doing it. So don't be embarrassed because you were a victim of a crime. It's no different than if you were the victim of a burglary. Don't be embarrassed. You just are a victim, and that happens, and that's why law enforcement is here, to help protect those victims. So you do need to report it, and the diligence by reporting is going to help other people. So if we can get the word out that these types of scams are happening, you might be able to prevent it from somebody else, which take that embarrassment, now you're helping. So there's some advantages to reporting.
So there are clearly positives for
Absolutely.
You said about 10%
Yes.
is the number
Yes.
from the Federal Trade Commission.
Yes.
So if the state of Vermont, through the Consumer Assistance Program, CAP, which, by the way, is operated through the Attorney General's office.
Correct.
If they're reporting 5,000, and we're looking at that being 10%.
Right. So yeah, roughly 10% if you're basing it on what the Better Business Bureau is reporting in their study, along with the Federal Trade Commission. So 10%, you think about that. I mean, we have a population of maybe 600,000 people in this state. It almost equals their numbers that they're telling us. So there's probably a lot more.
Okay. And the dollar amount, too.
Yes, by far. I mean, if you were to go nationwide, they're estimating in the millions, but they're hundreds of millions, but they're thinking more like it's the billions. It just, again, not reported. So in Vermont, I want to say they were estimated probably at least a couple $1 million of fraud money.
Okay. And, considering how small Vermont is in terms of population.
Absolutely.
Now, and when I'm dealing with other people and I'll say, and they'll talk about, the problems in another state. And I said, well, understand that, Vermont, the whole population of Vermont, from looking at Pennsylvania, for example, is about a third the size of Philadelphia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have to kind of put it in perspective for that bigger number. There probably is another issue in terms of, who collects the data.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Because there are several different organizations out there that do that. You got the Consumer Assistance Program through the Attorney General's office. You got the Federal Trade Commission. We have law enforcement that we try to keep track of stats. But unfortunately, it's difficult because all these different reportings are not all funneled into one area. And so it's unfortunate that we have all these different numbers out there, and these studies are difficult to follow because we don't have one clearinghouse. The Federal Trade Commission has come, in my view, has been the closest by gathering information from states, but not everybody reports that to them.
And it's possible to get duplicate reports.
Absolutely. So the numbers can be skewed. That's the problem.
In Vermont, would you characterize any particular group as being more likely to be a victim?
In Vermont, in general, I would say our senior population. And there's a few reasons for that. One, we're rural. Two, a lot of our senior people are at home to answer the phone calls, check their emails, and do that stuff. And they're generally good people, but they're not, they want to help. And the problem is they just do it and no one's really checking on them. And they don't check with other people because they just assume that everything's legitimate. So our senior population, unfortunately, especially the ones that live in the extreme rural areas where they have not a lot of contact with people.
Would there be any particular suggestion on how family or friends might be able to get involved with this? Because if we're looking at a large number of seniors, and we also know that a lot of them are isolated and rural in this state, what would be a good recommendation in terms of family in getting involved in this?
Sure, and this really goes for anybody. I mean, this has no age discrimination. It really doesn't. What it comes down to is call a family member if you can, call a friend, and check them. Say, I'm getting this request. This is strange. Call law enforcement. We can help verify their information if they're getting legitimate requests for money. Because most of the time, people don't call you for money or they want you to send them money. So let's think about that. But they do. And if you need those checks, I mean, because there's different types of scams that are out there. So it kind of depends on what type of scam is happening. If it's a family member where you're getting one of those imposter ones, I think they refer to as the grandparent fraud or a scam, where they call up and say they're in extreme need of money quickly and they need you to send it. They may even use a family member's name. Check to see if they're even away. I mean, call them. Say, okay, I will get back to you. Or just hang up on those people and get back to them. And check and verify, call those people. If there's nobody for them to have check, call law enforcement. We can go over and check to see if that person's there. So there's different things. I guess the point, what I'm trying to say, Elliott, is that please reach out and check and verify. And we can and let people help you.
So if you're in doubt, you're not going to be a pest.
Not at all.
By contacting law enforcement, because I think that's another possible issue for particularly some older people, is that they may feel that, I don't want to bother
I hate
the
when
police.
I hear that.
This isn't important, so I don't want to bother, the county sheriff's office, my local police, the state police. I'll just hold on to this myself.
No, and they shouldn't feel that way because that's what we're here for. That's what we're about. Sometimes we may not immediately be able to respond, but that means hold off on giving help or dishing out your money. We will help. That's what we're there for. Because I would much rather help protect somebody from their savings than to have to go and take a complaint that they were basically scammed. So it's not a bother at all.
Okay. Now, one of the things that we feel in AARP is, although seniors tend to be victims, that we may not be looking at the whole problem when we're dealing with seniors only. And I'm sure the Vermont State Police and other law enforcement also have some issues with what other age groups are possibly being targeted.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize that our seniors understand that actually the largest population of people that are being scammed are your youth, your younger people, because they're usually one click away from trying to gain free money or a prize. The problem is with our seniors is they usually have larger savings and they have much larger monetary losses. So yes, the seniors are not the only ones that are being scammed. Everybody is. I don't care if you're a doctor, a nurse, police officer. It can happen to anybody. So that's why, again, when I get into the embarrassment portion, is because it can happen to anybody. And you got to remember that. So there is no just targeting seniors.
Okay. So basically this is a non-discriminatory crime. The people in Vermont have, been looking at a variety of different scams being presented to them in their homes and whatever. Is there any that you're seeing kind of more of today? A higher volume of of reports or an area of more concern?
Well, I mean, I know the Attorney General's office through CAP has created a list of the top 10. I mean, I could go through some of those, and they're basically the same ones that we're seeing, so it's common. I mean, there's the IRS debt collection, that someone claims that you owe back taxes, and they're calling you and they want you to send them money immediately. I can tell you, do not do that, because the IRS is not going to notify you that way. So that's if you really think you owe back taxes, what you should do is actually hang up and call a legitimate number that you trust for the IRS and ask them. And but yeah, the IRS is one. I mean, there's the actual Social Security number phishing. They use that one where they'll try to obtain your Social Security number, because these are all easy for them. If they can get that, it opens up the door. I can also promise you that the Social Security Administration is not going to call you and ask you for a number that they already have. So it doesn't make sense. Do not give it to them. I don't know. I mean, I could keep going. There's quite a few of them that are, but go ahead, sir.
Well, one that we've seen a number of reports recently is the romance scam.
Yes.
And maybe you could
Yeah.
enter that one a little bit.
Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of done in some other ways with the romance. I mean, again, that's like the same scenario of I like to refer to it as the imposter. I mean, where they actually are setting up a scenario where they, where they may be getting, pretending they're telling you they're getting married. They may want you to send them money. And to help them with their charity or whatever, they're helping with their marriage. There's also, again, the one that they've been, again, I don't mean to get away from just a romance, but the kidnapping that they said they have a relative, or there's been a car accident, there's been a serious accident. So I don't know if that's the general area that you're talking about as much, but those are the ones I'm seeing.
Okay. I think I'm being a little more specific to, building up a romantic relationship.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. I thought you were talking about the marriage. I apologize. Yeah. So yes. Unfortunately, they will send you pictures of themselves. They will start sending stuff like that to try to engage in you and try to build up a relationship to build your trust. And while they're doing it, it's kind of like the burglar that's picking at your lock. And what they're doing is they're picking in that, and by building that trust to get in close to you, so they can start gaining access to your accounts and your personal information. That's all they're doing. And you got to be cautious of that, because they are very charming. They are they're very kind to you. They may look like they're actually want to marry you at some point, but really what they're looking for is your money. Through my experiences, Elliott, I haven't seen a lot of those, but they do happen. And the unfortunate part about those, it goes back to the embarrassment. The person, after they're scammed from their money, don't report it.
The other side of that, I think, is that most people think that these scams, and particularly these sophisticated ones, happen very quickly. Like it's a one-shot deal, and you get one call.
Right.
But I'm sure what you're finding is something quite different from that.
Yeah, excellent point that you're bringing up. The long term. Let's talk about that. I mean, it's really about, if they can build your trust, the more they're going to be able to get. So it's the longer they can stay in that. Well, if you go back to the burglar analogy, it's the longer they can stay in the home, the more they can get. So it's about staying with you. So as they're dating you or romancing you, they're stealing from you. So the longer they can stay in there, and by the time you catch them, all your savings and all your valuables could be depleted. So no, it doesn't just have to be the quick phone call or the letter in the mail or an email or some sort of phishing attempt. What it really can be is that a person could be living with you for 2 to 3 years and doing this.
Okay. That brings up a whole other area, which is either the scam or the fraud that's committed close to home.
Right, absolutely.
Do we have a problem with that?
Again, if we do, it's underreported. I will tell you that. And again, it's sometimes difficult, because now they've gained so much trust into the person that now it becomes sometimes a civil litigation, because they're now living with them and they've been signed into their account. So it's very difficult to show that it's a fraud. It's the person, the victim knows it is. They end up figuring it out. But now this person has entered into your life. They're on your bank accounts. They have, you basically gave them permission. You signed them in, and they're there. So To be honest with you, Elliott, I can't tell you how big of a problem it is because a lot of those people don't come forward to at least law enforcement.
I would assume that the best situation then would be if the victim at least has some sense of what's going on. Again, report it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because we can look into that. We can see this person usually, I should say this, the person that's committing a fraud usually has a history. I mean, they just didn't wake up one day and become a fraudster. They usually have thefts in their lives, or they've been caught for other stuff. So it's important that we can investigate, we can look into. Sometimes we may have to stop just because it might turn into a civil litigation, and a criminal pursuit was no longer available. But that doesn't mean we can't look into it. Don't let it just stop because you think it's that. Let us help determine that.
Now, I would also guess that in some of these cases, we're dealing with elderly people who may not be completely, logical or have lost the ability to rationalize. And in that kind of case, is there something that would be a good recommendation for family members?
Absolutely. What they should do is there's a couple different resources for that. First of all, be involved with your family. You should always be involved with your family. Make sure you're watching out for them. If same with friends, neighbors, they should help each other. But if you suspect something like that is occurring, there's Adult Protective Services you can make the complaint with, who will also notify law enforcement, or vice versa. If you notify law enforcement, we're also mandated reporters because they're vulnerable adults, and it's a mandated reporting situation. So don't ignore it. Don't think there's nothing that can be done, because there are agencies out there that can help work, especially with the people that may be vulnerable.
Prevention.
Yes, prevention.
Let's take a little time on prevention.
Okay.
What are some of the things that people can do to be more defensive?
Okay.
I guess is a good word.
Yeah, no.
Without being paranoid. Because
right.
I think, one thing that I don't want to do with either this program or the articles that I write is get people to the point that, I have to lock myself in my house and I can't go out, or,
Right.
I have to be completely paranoid and be guarded on everything. But yet, there are some logical things that people can do.
Yes.
That will provide them with some degree of protection.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know exactly, because you don't want to have people running around scared. And it's you don't have to be. What you have to do is be alert. And what you have to do is be informed. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on out there. There's opportunities out there. There's, besides newspapers, watch shows such as yours, Elliott. Pay attention to what's going on. Visit the Federal Trade Commission. There's alerts out there that tell you what type of frauds are out there. So staying informed to me is important. Just to know that you're not naive to what can happen. Doesn't mean you have to not answer a phone call or do anything like that. It just means make sure you're just a little bit cautious when you're dealing with something that seems a little bit out of the ordinary. You can sign up for instant alerts, I believe, through the Consumers Assistance Program. They can send you out text messages, emails, whatever you want. Just to hey, this fraud's going around. Pay attention. Again, that goes about being informed. Investigate before you send money. Please don't just send money out. I don't care if they're calling up and say they're working for the Police Benevolent Association. Call the police department. See if that's really true. See if those are really occurring. And don't be intimidated by them, because you're in control on the other end of that line. You have the power of going click, and you can just hang up on them. And if you're afraid of them showing up or anything like that, again, call law enforcement. I would say more likely than not, no one's going to show up at your house because they don't want to be caught. So if they're throwing threats out there, if you're concerned, definitely call us. But don't forget, you're in control of that. Sorry, there's a lot of prevention that can happen. You can contact your local state sheriff departments, ask them about the things, ask them for guidance, assistance. There's the securities of the insurance division from the Department of Financial Regulation. If someone wants you to invest money, call them and check on the broker. See if this broker really is a person. I already mentioned the Secretary of State's office, the professional regulation. They actually show you who has complaints against people, if they're contractors or whatever they may be, whoever they may be.
So even though they may not be required to have a license,
right?
there would.
But you're right. So
could be
you can always research and ask people because complaints still come in. For computers, keep your viruses protection up to date because there are the ones where you get the pop-ups and they want you to click. Don't click. Please don't click. But keep your virus protection up to date. Don't give out your personal information, your bank's accounts or anything like that. No legitimate business is going to call you and do that if you didn't initiate it. Just always remember, if you're not initiating this to a legitimate company, no one just calls you and asks you for your stuff. So don't give it to them. That's just a couple of those. Some other prevention I like to always make sure people understand is you're entitled by statute to get a free credit report annually through one of the major credit bureaus. Do that. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes you about 5 minutes. And you can do that through the Federal Trade Commission or Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. See if any accounts have been opened up. That's not being paranoid. It's good to know. It's even good to know what you might even have out there that you didn't know. If you are suspecting some stuff with your credit cards, you can freeze your accounts. You can put alerts on your accounts. Those are just some things that you can do in prevention. The one that I don't like myself is change your passwords because we always kept, our whole life is passwords now. We have multiple passwords that we try to keep track of and we lose them. And don't write them down so someone can just come in and take them from you. And the last one I would say is pay attention to your wallet or your purse. If you're grocery shopping and you walk away from it, someone grabs that and walks away with it, they got your identity and everything. They can open up accounts. They may just throw your stuff away. They may just take your license, and that's all they need because it has your address and all that on it.
Wow.
There are a few, but and the last thing I've only had a few experiences this. When you do give your credit card or your debit card to somebody, see where they're going with it. There are skimmers out there. And we did have a report, I'll tell you one time when I was working in Rutland, where someone had skimmed. And what a skimmer is, it basically records your credit card number, and then they turn around and sell it. And then it's all over the place. Again, I'm not trying to say that there's a lot of that, but I was surprised to see it happen in Vermont. So
we've actually seen it in a couple of the ski areas on ATM machines.
Yeah. Oh, false fronts? Yeah. So that's scary.
So just a kind of an interesting point, because you brought this up with the Police Benevolent Society.
Sure.
I got a phone call yesterday.
Okay.
And it was from a gentleman who, I remember his name was Mike.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if it was you.
No, it wasn't.
But his name was Mike, and he was raising funds for some police organization. And in the process of the conversation, and by the way, the phone number was a Vermont phone number.
That's spoofing. That can be spoofing.
Okay. And I don't know how legitimate this was.
Right.
But I asked him a question, which was, are you a professional fundraiser?
Excellent question.
And he didn't answer it.
It's a great question.
And so I repeated the question, and he said, well, thank you, sir, and hung up.
Excellent.
I mean, because of your extensive involvement in law enforcement, I mean, is this happening quite a bit?
Yes, because I have also, when I was with a previous department, I was the president of our benevolent association, and I remember how the fundraising worked in that. So it's we would always send out notifications if we were going to do a fundraiser, and we'd also give them a number to contact the police department to verify that these are true requests. So yes, they do happen, because it's easy for a fraudster to call up and say that, especially if they are occurring. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated. So what you may want to do, if you truly want to make a donation to any organization that's doing that, you may want to hand deliver it. That might be just something you want to do. But yes, it is happening. And there are things that you should do to check. And that was an excellent question to ask them and put them on the spot. And you see how it ended it. Yeah. That's excellent.
I had actually gotten a call last fall from an organization claiming to be the New England Sheriff's Association. And I asked if they were professional fundraisers, and the gentleman said yes.
Yep.
And then I asked him, what percentage of the money that you collect goes to the Sheriff's Association, at which point he said 14%.
And that sounds about right. It's usually on those when those fundraisers come out, you're paying them for convenience to do all that work for you. So you get a small. The departments only get a small.
That's not unusual.
That is not unusual, but I would have still even followed up with probably a phone call to the sheriffs and say, "Is this really happening?"
I actually did. I
Good.
called Chad Schmidt in Bennington County.
Excellent.
And
You should.
And he was very quick to respond on that.
Good.
So, anything else you think we should bring out here?
No, I think it's important that people recognize that it can happen to anybody. Please don't be embarrassed. And I really ask people, I'm asking to report it. You're not bothering law enforcement when you do that. That's what we are here for. And if there's any guidance or anything that we can do, or even prosecute these cases, we are more than glad to do that. But please report. Please report. Please report.
So, Mike, I want to thank you for coming all the way down here and spending some time with me. And hopefully we've provided another point of view from law enforcement in terms of what the scam and fraud scene looks like in Vermont. My guest today has been Mike Notte. Mike is a detective sergeant with the Vermont State Police. And I want to really thank you because this has been a great opportunity for us to learn a little bit more about what to do and what not to do, and particularly the importance of reporting.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.